The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Ex Libris, our game of the week, discuss theme chasing in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five publishers. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
Welcome to episode 176. Doug, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I think I'm kind of relaxed and rested after a vacation, which felt good, down to the windy city of Chicago.
So you don't need a vacation for the vacation, which can sometimes happen?
Correct, yeah. My brother actually did a blog post recently talking about the difference between a vacationing and traveling.
Yeah.
And the idea of like traveling is not the same as vacationing.
No.
And those are the traveling is the one where you come home and you're like, I need a vacation from the trip we just took. This was a good mixture of both.
Good.
And we happened to sandwich it between 2 weekends, so there was some good recovery beforehand and afterwards.
No, that's nice. And it's so important to do that with families, you know, because time just flies, doesn't it?
Slips by, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting to, I've talked to my parents about this before too, but it's amazing. You know, you can go on super grand trips with your kids and do all this planning and effort. And the things that they remember at the end of the trip are things that you didn't plan for, or you never thought that they would remember, or you don't even remember. Wasn't a big deal to you.
Yeah.
And
the little dive restaurant that you just dove into to get a snack because people needed to eat, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
one thing they hold on to.
Yeah, and I have those memories from when I was a kid traveling, and certainly Chicago is, 120 miles from us, 90 miles from us?
Yeah, and the Chicagoland area, I mean, you can be in the suburbs in a little over an hour.
We're 10 minutes away from the Chicagoland area at this point. It gets pretty crazy, but I'm going to jump into, while we're talking about it, because I don't want to come back to it later, but it's something that occurred to me that is awesome in gaming after going on this trip.
What's awesome in gaming after going on this trip, Doug?
Oh, thanks. I am grateful to live where we do. And my reasoning for that is, A, the traffic is 100% manageable. The other thing is the cost of living in big cities, which then correlates all the way down to the cost of board games and gaming in big cities, was eye-opening. Like, I understand people have to make rent, but it is no surprise why online retailers do so well, because you've got I went into a couple of game stores and it was way over MSRP.
Oh, gotcha.
And they're just, you can tell it's like they have to charge that just because the rent is probably astronomical. But
sure,
I mean, when you're going to a store and you see stuff for 10, 20% over MSRP, and I'm like, I could get that back home for MSRP or less, and grateful for either Noble Knight or just the online stores. And I'm not even talking about Amazon. I'm just talking about, whether it's Game Nerds or Noble Knight or Miniature Market, some of those bigger online stores that I can see why those have traction. And if I lived in a big city, I could imagine I would be spending more money there than maybe at a local game store. So I was grateful to live where we were, happy to be home. Let's put it that way.
Good.
So what's new with you?
Oh, lots to follow up on. I think that I have a whole chunk of what's awesome with gaming and games played this week. But before I do that, for follow up, we had a really good feedback. A really good feedback, meaning one. No, we had good feedback regarding our interviews. And We're looking to set up a few more interviews and maybe even build a few shows around interviews very soon. And so that was interesting feedback to get from folks on Discord and an email. And so we love getting feedback from our listeners. And while you were gone on vacation, I did spend some time in the Discord. Boy, is that a cool little community, the Game Schooler Podcast Discord. I know you always do a callback to it at the end of this segment, but I just wanted to, shower some praise on the folks in there who are beacons of light for the new gamers. And I also see some experienced gamers that maybe they're in a bunch of different Discord communities, but they'll drop in to just see what's going on from time to time. So it's nice to see the varying levels of participation in our Discord, and what a welcoming and kind community as well. So that's just for follow-up.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. They're so positive. They keep us on track and motivated, and I do think there's a good mix of the casual and the hardcore and the accepting of both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, people who just want to play games
and try and navigate that. Yeah,
exactly. And then what's awesome with gaming for me, we got a first play through of Cities, which was we were fortunate enough to get a review copy of this from DeVere. Thank you. It's designed by Game Schooler Podcast Hall of Famer Phil Walker Harding and Stephen Finn. Unofficially, we haven't had the ceremony yet.
No,
but maybe we'll have to get our own T-shirt, our own Hall of Famer T-shirt.
Yeah.
Find a way to just throw it at him if we see him at Gen Con and get out of there. But
throw and run.
Back to the game, which it was fun. It was good to get together and get through that and see it. I had come fresh off of a week of hobby gaming, and so to get a rule book that is truly 4 pages, it was a nice exhale. Like, oh yeah, I can get this up and running. This looks fun. So that was cool, and it releases in August, and I'm sure as that release date approaches, we'll have more information. But just wanted to just get that out there and let people know that we're going to get continued plays of it in and run it through its paces.
Great way to make it through a tornado warning.
Yeah, we probably, I don't know if we want to actually address that, Doug. I mean, tornadoes are real. Tornadoes are serious.
Of course they are. And it was nice. It was nice to be in a basement, protected.
Well lit, with the news on.
And playing a game.
Yeah,
so
all of a sudden my kids are right next to us.
Games are a important part of the hobby of getting through tough things in life. Let's put it that way, right? Whether they're external or internal.
Yeah. You're not going to get any snarky comments from me. I take my tornadoes seriously.
I do 100%.
Okay, good. It's hard to tell with you sometimes, Douglas. Oh, good stuff. And then we also recently played Hamburg. Got that one to the table. And, I think we'll be talking more about that in an upcoming School of Gaming segment as we work on a comparison between Hamburg and Bruges. So been reflecting on that. I know I want to talk to you more offline on it as I've looked at the rule book and looked at it solo, but it was nice to I'm excited for some of those comparison segments that we potentially have coming up in our School of Gaming.
Yeah, cool.
And I have one more to talk about.
Go ahead.
And then I'll be done. But I actually have to break this up over our next 2 episodes. But Doug, I got a new game played, and I'm excited to play it with you. While Doug was on vacation, I did some learning of board games, and one game, I only played it on Board Game Arena, but I'm going to pick it up at Noble Night. It's called Space Station Phoenix, and it's on Board Game Arena. It's from Rio Grande, which I know we will never get a review copy of because of Doug's absolute... You just destroy the art of Rio Grande over time, but the game itself, this looks like a good one. So... just wanted to share that with you. I think it falls in the light hobby. You're building out a space station on your turn. You have like 5 or 6 different actions that you could take. I'd heard about this when it came out, and then it kind of disappeared.
When did it come out?
And I saw 2022, but it was in that kind of weird time-ish where a whole slog of games just got thrown into the world.
Sure.
And Noble Knight has a used copy, so I'm going to, pick it up for $30 under MSRP, if you can believe that or not, unless some of our astute listeners snag it from me before I can check out with it in my cart. But cool little game where
better buy it tonight before this drops.
Yeah, no kidding. Where you can take someone else's card, right? So all of the cards are open. So I could pay you a couple of extra gems, but I'm going to take your card, so then you can't take that action. So I'm interested to play with you. It'll be you're either going to love that game or you're absolutely going to hate that game and flip the table. But that's what I had. That's what was awesome.
Wow, and well, congratulations to them. This art looks respectable.
Hey,
Looking at it at Board Game Geek. Congratulations, Rio Grande. I feel like Will Ferrell and Elf. It's like you finally did it. You made the world's best cup of coffee.
the gameplay on BGA was awesome. So
3.05. Oof. Pushing my limits.
I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll get it played.
All right. Just a quick follow-up.
Or we won't, and I'll have it in my collection. So moving
forever.
on.
Forever. The last thing is what's on my shelf this week. We've got Tiny Towns, which we talked about in episode 13. This is the start of a little bit of a AEG shelf. I think the remainders are on a different cube. The Guild of Merchant Explorers, which I played once, and I like the gameplay, but I haven't gone back to it. I'm intrigued by your review of the solo mode, but I don't know. I don't know how long that'll stay in my collection. You have it. You'll probably never get rid of it.
I will never get rid of it.
My third shelf game on that shelf is Calico, which I think is an awesome, and it kind of kicked off the why can't I think of the name? Cascadia, and then followed up with Verdant. And I think Calico is possibly my favorite of the three. And I like the way that it gets tighter and tighter as the game goes on. You can't do anything, and it's about kind of building a little blanket for your cats. And Michael, I don't think that you've played this, but I've been kind of leery on the colors and shapes of this one. So
Doug,
we'll
I
have to
haven't
see.
played it. I've been also kind of leery on the colors and shapes. I feel like I would slow down the whole table.
And then the last one is Seventh Continent, which I backed on Kickstarter a long time ago, which I'd love to get Michael to play this one again.
I want to play that again.
Because he played it very early when he came to game nights, and he made some ill-advised
not to do
choices.
inside jokes, but I came in at the midpoint of a game night. They're like, sit down and play. I'd had a 14-hour burner of a day. Upset kids, upset teachers, upset parents. This is back when I was a principal, and now everyone knows a very mediocre principal at that. And I sat down to play this game. Next thing you know, I'm swimming out in the ocean. I get eaten by a shark, and I'm screaming at people at game night. Didn't teach it to me properly.
Let's say this. Mistakes were made.
Yes, mostly by me. And I own that at this point.
Self-inflicted wounds were made.
Yes. I'd like to play that one again. I would. But I think it's like a 2-hour game, right?
I think you can kind of go as long as you want.
Okay.
I will never forget that night of Michael. He thinks his character is gonna go swim to this island, and he got attacked by a shark. Man. And then he got wounds, so he was actively bleeding, and then decided to get back in the water because he's going to take another stab at it.
It's a board game. Go for it.
It did not work out well.
I was going to ride the shark to the island.
Okay, Fonz. Michael talked about it earlier, the Discord. You can sign up, gameschooler.com/Discord. Great community. We'd love to have you. Even if you stop in to check it out, we'd appreciate that. Continue to spread the word about the podcast if you like what we're doing. We love new listeners and introducing this hobby and what we're doing here to new people as well. And maybe it's a little bit more of a friendly landing place than some of the snarkiness that might be online elsewhere. If you have any questions,
if there's snark, it's usually just the two of us directing it at each other. So
usually,
you've been warned.
Yeah. And if you have questions or comments, reach out to us, email at gameschooler.com, and there's a contact form on the website as well. With that out of the way, let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Ex Libris. Doug, Give us the stats.
All right. This game was originally published in 2017. And for the purpose of this discussion, we will be talking about the revised edition. So if you are looking that up on Board Game Geek, it is under Ex Libris, the revised edition. The original came out in 2017. Essentially the same game with some kind of cosmetic changes and a little bit of a ease of play type stuff. It's published by Renegade Game Studios, and the designer is Adam P. McIver, with the art by Jacque Davis. 1 to 4 players, 45 minutes. Publisher says 14. I kind of wanted to look on the box to say that, and Board Game Geek says 12 plus, which is probably right, I would say. It is a family game, but leans. It's just kind of going into the light hobby category.
That's where I have it.
Light hobby.
I do, but I'm not. I won't. We can talk about it when we get into it. You have it at family.
It's right on the edge. I mean,
Really
if you're going by the Board Game Geek weight rating, they would say it's a family and accessible to all. When we talk later, I think this is a game night game. This is for gamers, but I think if somebody. But I have played it with my niece and certainly my nephew, who is not a gamer, and he picked it up pretty well as long as you've got a gamer at the table kind of spearheading and guiding through. So I think gamer required, not necessarily need to be a gamer to play. Is that a good description?
It is. It's really good description. And in the 2017, so this was released in 2017, re-released in 2023. And Doug can tell you he's owned both versions, so he can get into the details of it. But the 2017 landing page on Board Game Geek has it at 10 plus. So I do think it's one of those things that as the game has stayed out, it kind of settled. It's in that 12 plus, 13 plus, 14 plus. But go ahead. Yep.
So, and it is a 2018 Mensa Select winner and the 2018 Origins Award for Best Card Game. So, it is a card game. When I think of that category, I don't think of this in that genre, but clearly it did well enough for that to get that recognition. In Ex Libris, you are a collector of rare and valuable books in a thriving fantasy town, and the mayor has just announced a new seat in the village council, Grand Librarian. The prestigious and lucrative position will be awarded to the citizen with the most extraordinary library. To outshine your competition, you'll need to expand your personal library by sending your trusty assistants out into the village to find the most impressive tomes. Sources for the finest books are scarce, so you'll need to beat your opponents to them when they pop up, especially if they match your library's secret focus. You only have a few days before the mayor's official inspector comes to judge your library, and she will use her official inspection form to grade your library on several criteria, including alphabetical order, shelf stability, prominent works, and variety. And don't think she'll turn a blind eye to books the council has banned. So in this game, you are a librarian that is collecting books to put on bookshelves. The cards of the game feature books and symbols associated to various types of books. There are 6 categories. There are corrupted codices, fantastical fictions, historical volumes, monster manuals, reference texts, and spells and potions. So 6 different types. Before the game begins, each player is going to get a card representing one of those book types, and that is going to be your personal focus, the one that you're going to get bonus for collecting a lot of those type of books. You're also going to determine from the leftover cards a prominence work, and that's the one that is going to be rewarded. Everybody, for whoever has the most is going to get so many points, and second most, so many points, that type of thing. And there's also banned books, which will give you negative points for every book that you collect of that category. This is a worker placement game with set collection. You are going to be sending your assistants. You have 3 assistants to start the game and throughout the entire game that you're going to be sending to various locations. And those locations are going to change throughout the game. You'll start out with 3, and then the next round you'll have 4. Then you'll have 5 locations to go through as the game goes on. As you go to those locations, you're going to be acquiring cards, and sometimes those locations will allow you to shelve cards, which means put them into your library. When you're shelving a card, you can only place a card orthogonally adjacent to a card that's already been played.
Next to.
Correct. And your library can be up to 3 shelves tall, as wide as you would like. So you're going to be adding books to the shelves. Each person also has a player board with locations that you can send there to either draw a new card or shelve a card. It's not as powerful as some of the abilities that are out on the table, but sometimes you just need to shelve a card. The cards in this game represent library shelves, and they feature usually 3 to 4 books and a letter on top. And for an example, this one is a letter B card, and put it up on camera there. And each card will then say the letter, the categories that are in there, and then a number. So in this case, it's 2 out of 10. So there are 10 letter B cards in the game, and this is the second one in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
So as you put cards down, you're trying to put them in alphabetical order because you will get any card that is out of alphabetical order at the end of the game gets flipped over and becomes an empty shelf. So you won't score anything. So you're trying to put cards in alphabetical order. The game will end, depending on the player count, when somebody has placed a certain number of books.
Could be 18, could be 16. It just depends on how many players are at the table.
And then that'll trigger a final round. You'll play one more. The interesting thing about this is that each round, whatever 3 new locations are going to come out, each with a different way of collecting cards. Some may allow you to shift cards in the library. Some may allow you to pick up 4 cards, pick one, give one to another player, and put the other 2 back. And depending on player count, there's various spaces, a number of spaces that you could go to. And then they all have a kind of a priority number. Out of all the new building or new locations that have come out, whichever one has the lowest is going to stay for the rest of the game. The rest of them are going to be discarded, never to be seen again. And so every round you're getting new locations to go to, and some are going to stick around. So that pool gets bigger and bigger.
And those are the abilities. Your cards on your shelf, not only do they need to be in alphabetical order, but they need to be in alphanumerical order. Within the letters, there's a numbering system. Sometimes it's 1 out of 3, sometimes it's 1 out of 10, and you have to get those numbers in order as well. So you have to manage that as you're building out your bookcase or your tableau right in front of you.
Yep. So at the end of the game, you're going to score as long as everything's in alphabetical order. Like I said, you'll flip over ones that are not. You're also going to score a stability bonus, which is starting with a 2x2 grid of cards. The biggest rectangle you can make is going to score you 1 point for each card in that rectangle. You're going to then award out the prominent works, which whoever has the most collected of that category is going to get the most points and on down the line. You're going to score negative points for the banned books. You're going to score double points for your personal focus, your focus. So if for me it's monster manuals, I'm going to get 2 points for every monster manual I have in my deck, and then or in my shelf. And then the last one is a variety bonus. So like in a lot of Reiner Knizia games, whichever category, excluding banned books don't count in this, but whatever category of books you've collected the least of is going to score you 3 points per that number. So if I've only collected 3 spells and potions, I'm going to get 9 points for that. So you're trying to build all of your collection up kind of evenly as best as possible. And whoever scores the most points wins. The fun thing about this game, which I'll throw out there right away, is the diversion of the titles of the books on the cards. So while you're playing the game, it's such an empty part of the shouldn't say empty, but it's such an Easter egg. It's a side part of the game because it doesn't affect gameplay. But when somebody else is taking their turn, you kind of look down and look at the title of your books, and it gives a little chuckle. So like this one is Itchiest Itching Powders, which is right next to irregular regulations. And it's just a fun little Easter egg.
And
Lectures.
what type of card is that on?
That is the itchiest itching powders is a spells and potion. That's on the 8th card out of 8 of the letter I. And then the reference text is irregular regulations. How to take hostages. That's a corrupted codices, along with how things were before, which is a historical document.
So, and listeners will know Doug loves theme, and this game brings it, even in what you're just discussing right there, down to that doesn't have anything to do with the scoring, but thematically it's all connected into the other pieces, into the other mechanics of the game.
So what do you like about this one, Michael?
Well, the game has a ton of mechanics that I really like to play, but that might be unique to just me as a person. I mean, you talked about, I love the hand management, and that's different from the set collection. So the hand management is private. The cards that I'm picking up, when am I going to put these down, and in what order? So in the off time, while somebody else is taking their turn, I'm really getting to decide what I'm going to do on my turn. I love the worker placement. You just have the 3 workers, and building out the bookshelf is a lot of fun. And so all those pieces, all those mechanisms come into a really cool game. And at the same time, we've talked about, we've danced about it a little bit, but that's where I think this is a light hobby game because of the number of mechanisms and the comprehension that needs to happen from round to round. In between each round, you have those new areas that are coming out for your workers to go to, and that brings a sense of excitement, I think, especially in repeated plays. The first time, and it was actually the second time that I played this game, but it had been so long in between plays, it was a little bit like, okay, what's going on now? But I think if you're playing this game repeatedly as a family or as a game group or as your main game, that brings a level of excitement. Okay, what's coming up next? What's coming out this round? And so I think there's not a lot of stall in this game. From when you start it, you're managing your hand, you're managing your workers, you're seeing what you can do. But I'm speaking strictly as an adult gamer. I'm not speaking as somebody who's trying to develop skills with my children or in the classroom. So that's why I said it. Look, this is a light hobby. If you know that's what it is, you know what you're going to get out of it. The other piece, I love the decision making in here, and I really think that students, younger gamers can learn from some of their joys and their mistakes, especially as you're placing the cards into the bookshelf. I'm going to send it back to you because I could keep going and keep ranting. I thought you did a great job of describing it. I think this game can be challenging to describe because there are a few different mechanisms that are colliding, and especially with trying to figure out that end game scoring. But I'll send it back to you, Doug. What do you like about it?
Yeah, I love. So the other thing I didn't mention is that you will have cards in your hand that don't do anything until you actually put them in your library. So there is that level of hand management of, okay, I'm trying to collect some cards. I want to collect more before I put it down, which leads to one of my things that I really like, which is when you place your first card in the library, everything's open. If I put an I down, okay, well, I can go above that with some A, B, C's, and D's, and I can go to the side with some G's and H's, and I can go to J and K, and I got a whole lower level that I can fit with R's and S's and things like that. And so the world's kind of your oyster, and you have some ways that you can go. But as the game goes on, it closes in on itself to where I have 2 I's in there, and maybe it's the I3 and the I5 or the I7, and a card gets flipped over, and it's one that goes right in between those 2, and it has all the symbols I'm looking for, and there's nothing I can do about it. Maybe there'll be an ability that will help me get it in there, and that's why sometimes you're waiting for those locations to come out, because they do allow you to do some shuffling, and you're thinking, ooh, I can use that there. So I love how it closes itself in. And after repeated plays, you learn, like, how can I stay as open as possible, as long as possible, while still getting books down,
But
right?
here's what I like, and not every player is going to like this. Some will be repulsed by it. That can backfire on you. I have had a game very recently that I played with you where I waited way too long. And
Yeah.
you know what? The score shows it.
Yeah.
And I like that part of the game, though, too, that there's a little bit of chance in there, and you can be rewarded by it or you can be punished by it. But that's the type of game that it is.
Yeah, there's a good little mixture of long-term strategy of, like, I have a general idea what I'm trying to do, whether it's, with prominent works and your focus and trying to, it's like all of those you're balancing while also balancing, like, what's the best move for me now. And maybe as the game will go on, maybe that card will show up, but I got to move on. I got to keep moving.
Yeah.
And I do like with the rotating locations, the worker placement strategy. And sometimes it's not quite apparent until you play it a couple of times where it's like, yeah, I need to get to that place first, or wait on that one, or based on the cards there. Sometimes, as the game goes on, I can look across the table and be like, nobody can fit any of these cards in there. I don't need to send my worker there until the end.
Because there is a lot of known information at the table. Some of it's hidden, and it really depends on what that space is. But that's a great point, that if you're observant and looking at what is out there, you can really choose where to send your worker early or in the middle or later in the round.
The other thing is that there is some downtime in this game, but because I'm managing what my worker placement options are, trying to negotiate my hand and the icons, and trying to meet all of those different objectives, I never feel like I'm waiting around in a bad way.
Yeah, and that's what I had said about what I like about it. Yeah, and I think we both...
Even to the point of, I know exactly what I'm going to do, then I'll just start reading my cards.
Yeah.
And having a blast there. So that balancing act between the different objectives, the artwork, the icons, the personal table space, and what you accomplish as you go is rewarding to me. I find it really well done on that front. And I think this would be, I think you're right on with we've talked about a couple of these games recently where it's like, I feel like if you've got a gamer running it, it can work with families and non-gamers. If you don't, it then 100% falls into the light hobby category, and is going to be difficult to pick up.
And a distinction for me, I think a classic family level worker placement game is Santa's Workshop, a game that we recently covered as a game of the week. And for me, this is one step up. I'm not going to be able to pair up with my 8-year-old and easily play. I'm going to
but nobody's saying it's going to go to that age level anyway.
No, I got you. But even at that 12-year-old level, right? That middle school brain, somebody who's really bopping, and every kiddo is different, because I know that we could sit down and play this with your 12 or 13-year-old kiddo just fine. But there's that bit of bookkeeping from round to round that just leads to some comprehension positives and some possible issues, and it's very dependent on the people at the table, right? Because as those spots come out, there could be a level of excitement, or there could be a level of frustration. So some of it, all that I'm saying, it's just so that people know it's, buyer beware. Absolutely great game. Great part of it. And your kids, other people in your play group and their kids, your nieces, your nephews better than we do. But you just have to know that as you're coming in. The other thing is, I think, and don't take umbrage to this, Doug, or do take umbrage and fight back. I think this falls into a wheelhouse category for you where you're able to just run the game. And I think this falls into a moment of time in your game night period or era, whether it was your first 200 or 300 games with a previous game group that you had, where it's a sticky game for you. So you're able to run this. Open it up. Oh, we can play this. I'll get it going. And if somebody's coming to it cold, the point that you made earlier, I just want to make it again a second or even third time. If you have a gamer in the group, you can get this up and running. But if you're all coming and you're listening to the Game Schooler podcast, that's probably the case for a lot of our games. But this one's just one step a little bit higher than family. That's why I put it in the light hobby.
And I think there's an interesting thing that maybe would warrant a School of Gaming segment at some point, because having played this with gamers and non-gamers and a 12-year-old and stuff, I think what the takeaways or expectations are of those different groups of people, where a gamer is going to play this game and they want it to be chunky and they're thinking about it and really engrossed in trying to maximize points and do all of those things that gamers do, right? We get in a line and we're going to figure out how we're going to game the system and do that. And there's also a level of where you want to approach it at, where this game can be very kind of fun and lighthearted based on what people are bringing into the table or what their expectations are. So even though, did my 12-year-old daughter grasp this at the same level that you and I were playing at? Probably not. But her enjoyment or what she was getting out of it was very different. That was almost even irrelevant to the score, right? Like she was having fun the same way that when we talked about like a dog park where it's I just want to collect the dogs that are cute and fun to me. And I've had a blast the entire time doing it. Yeah. And I could care less about the score. I think there is a level of this in that game. And I'm curious where that goes throughout the hobby as we're in the hobby and as gamers, sometimes we forget that of what that experience can be.
The joy of gaming, right? Yeah. When you initially get and experience a game. I couldn't agree with you more, and that's where I want to jump into Fit, because you talked about being game night, but I also think this is a game that if you are game schooling or homeschooling, you may want to check out Ex Libris. If you have one or two kiddos that you're really getting into repeated plays, because this is not a computer science game. This is not a programming game. But I'm telling you, somebody could spend a lot of time unpacking this game and looking at possibilities. Can you imagine the spreadsheet that Adam P. McIver, the game designer, had when he put this thing together? You know what I mean? Because this is really a giant spreadsheet, and he's also an artist. And the art in this, especially the art, Jackie Davis and Adam P. McIver, and there's a third artist on this, it's phenomenal. But there is a lot of, I think, joy that can come into this game, that joy leads to engagement leads to learning, that if you're one of those listeners for us, you might want to check it out. You might want to look at it and see about picking it up at your friendly local game store and seeing if you could get some hours of learning out of this with skills and subjects. Yeah,
especially if your game group consists entirely of librarians. This is a game for you. The only other thing that I have, and then I'll talk about some of the differences between the original and the new printing. But
good
is resetting between rounds can be
not
a little
good that you're almost done, but good because I want to know those differences. I'm like one of our listeners. I really want to know. Sorry, back to you.
All right. So resetting between the rounds and kind of shuffling out those new locations can be a little bit cumbersome, and if I were developing the game or designing it, there are some things that I would do differently as far as having some permanent locations and not as much turnover. But the gameplay always overcomes that for me. So even while I'm playing it, I'm like, this seems kind of fiddly as I'm bringing out these new locations. And I think that can be So the gameplay, the artwork, all the stuff that we've talked about is great. Always overcomes that little shortcoming for me. I think while you're introducing new buildings or new locations to go to, that taking them off the top, having one person read aloud the new ability and then placing it down and doing that and kind of as a group thing works the best. Sometimes as gamers, we want to try and get things moving as fast as possible. And then as a result, you have 4 people all leaning over the table trying to read one thing. So even though you got it out faster, you're not comprehending it faster. So you're taking more time than if somebody just, read it and everybody was kind of focusing. Which leads to one of the improvements of the game is that the location tiles now have all of the pertinent information on them when you flip them over.
So you don't have to go to the rule book to find out.
You don't
what
have
it
to go to
means.
the rule book. The text, I think, is a little bit bigger, and it's in a position where it could be more easily read. I think some of the older one, it might have been over the image. So it's just kind of a cleaner structure there. The box is smaller, so it's got a smaller footprint. There was a center board that kept track of all of the scoring mechanisms, which now they replaced with some the same tiles that are the location tiles, and you just flip them over depending on player count. And so some of those improvements help them get the cost down. I think the MSRP on this is like $30, which maybe when it originally came out was probably in the $40 to $50 range. All of the assistants have now been screen printed, so that has been improved. And there's an expansion for this game, and all of that stuff fits in the smaller box. So those are the kind of the biggest differences. And then some. When you read
expansion comes with the.
It does not.
Okay.
There's a separate expansion available for it, but it still fits in the base game box.
And is everything compatible? Like if I have the.
I believe so. I think you
latest version, but I have the expansion from the last one. Can I port that over? Or
well, there was no expansion on the old version.
There it is.
So, but I believe the expansion is compatible with the old version. So you could get the new expansion if you already have the old version, and all of that content will fit in either the old box or the new, smaller base game box. The only other thing is just some marginal gameplay things that when they put that in their description is that there's improvements in gameplay. I don't know what they are. They may be so insignificant, whether it's there might be another B card or the way the symbols are laid out. I don't know, but those are the kind of the main takeaways.
Be a good project for a game school or homeschooler to go through.
Yikes. As far as skills, certainly there's a game with spatial perception, which strengthens the player's understanding of the spatial relationships of the objects in their environments. Constantly during this game, you're looking at your library in front of you, the cards in your hand, and trying to visualize, okay, I can fit that card there, that card there.
I brought 13 skills to the party for today, Doug. So you could pick a number 1 through 13, and I could kind of just shoehorn it in. There's so many. We've talked about a lot of them.
Yeah.
The observation. This is not, and this is something that I really like about it. This is not a strictly heads down game, even though it's hand management and I'm building out a tableau. Right.
Yeah.
I still have to look at what's going on across the table and with other gamers.
Yeah. The one that I threw in there that was kind of unique and we haven't talked about in a while is Logistics, which is a game that allows players to manage product flow in between the point of origin and consumption. So when I say that, you're probably thinking, Doug, this is not a pickup and delivery game. How does this work? Well, you are collecting those books from various points on the board and then figuring out where they need to go.
Yeah.
And how they're going to fit in. So there's a little bit of that packing a suitcase type of situation going on while you're playing this game. Is like, where am I going to put these cards, and when do I want to cut those routes off that pop up there? Of course, we talked about the strategic and tactical thinking. What are some other highlights for you as far as
I think
skills?
concentration, just knowing how there can be a little bit of a frustration of I really need this type of card to come out, and if it doesn't, am I able to concentrate and look across the table and look down at what's going on and look at my hand, and just being able to switch, focus, and go from one task to the next as I place a worker out, activate the location from where the worker's placed out, look at my hand. Am I able to do all those things? And I think the reason why it works so well for people a lot of different ages, and why it's not a full-blown hobby, but it's certainly a light hobby, or as you've even made the case, a family game, it's that it does all that in a very manageable way. And even the first time you're playing, a third of the way through the game, you kind of get the flow down like, oh, yeah, so I'm going to get a book out here, get a book out there, going for a rectangle. I can have 3 different levels on my shelf. I got this. But being able to concentrate and really lock in on what you're doing in a 45 to 60-minute game, it's just very rewarding as a gamer, and I think is a skill that can be honed over time.
Yeah, awesome. Anything else you want to talk about with this game, Michael?
No,
We did a pretty
it's a
deep
good
dive
one.
there.
And what's that?
I think we did a pretty deep dive there.
We really did, but it's also one that when we first played it, we weren't able to talk about it, even though we really wanted to, because it wasn't in print.
Yeah,
so this is one that
exactly.
we've had our eye on, going all the way back to 2020, Doug.
Yeah.
As we were getting ready to prepare the show. So here we are at
Yeah.
episode 176, and it's nice to talk
We
about
made
a
it.
great game.
We made it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is our game of the week, Ex Libris, the revised edition from Renegade Game Studios. Check it out if you get the chance. Now let's move on to the School of Gaming.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we're going to discuss theme chasing. Copycat publishers.
So this is something that's been kind of on my mind for a while. And I think we've talked a little bit about it off air. And it's something that I'm really interested in this segment because I like these where it's more of a conversation than necessarily anything specific. I don't have a ton of notes, actually more questions that I'm curious to get your responses on than I do. But the concept behind this is when a game comes out and it's extremely popular, and then the market seems to be flooded with games that are all the same type of theme. So some good examples of this are Wingspan,
Birds.
and Arc Nova,
Animals.
where animals and nature and that theme just then all of a sudden seem to be everywhere.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be themes. I mean, themes is what I kind of picked out or what I feel I see a lot of recently. But mechanisms and kind of structures also have that as well. So, for example, when Dominion came out, and then there's a glut of deck building games that all of a sudden came out. Love Letter came out and was a huge hit, and then all of a sudden everybody's making micro games and trying to do something similar. Welcome 2 came out, now everybody's making roll and writes, and there's just that type of thing. And I'm curious, how does that happen? Is this publishers or designers or both?
So I think there's a confluence of factors among creatives and among businesses that collide to make that happen. I think you have creatives that ideas are germinating. People are in similar playtesting groups. Thoughts kind of collide and bubble up, and all of a sudden, ooh, I've got this idea for a bird game. Well, I was working on a bird game. And then you have businesses, publishers, where if you sell 25,000 copies of a game, that's a huge congratulations. Now multiply that by 10. If something sells 250,000 copies of a game, that whole business side is going to be activating all of the creatives. Okay, who's got a bird game? We got to go to work. Look what this bird game did. And then where that hits us for the next 18 to 30 months, us, and I'm talking about us as players and gamers, right? We are just inundated with bird games to the point where Doug and I were at a trade show recently, and one of, I would say, both of our favorite publishers, it has a game coming out. It was like, that's Wingspan Junior. They're trying to scaffold people to Wingspan. Look at this iconography. Look at that.
Yeah.
So that's my hot take, just based on the question you posed. What do you think?
Well, I certainly think that there is from a taller corporate structure, the idea of like, well, we need a game that sells that well, so we're going to do that. I also agree with you that the idea is, okay, a game group plays a game or a designer plays a game and is like, oh, I could do this better, or what if you did this differently? And so then people start branching off of that general starting point. It's like, well, I've got a unique thing I can add to a deck building game, or what if we did a roll and write with this or that? So it's like I can see where those ideas germinate and where they start and how they kind of grow legs. Every once in a while, there happens to be a stance where like two companies release very similar pirate games at the same time or something
Right.
like that. But this is more where it's the long tail and people keep coming out with it. I guess I'm always confused why it happens to take the form a lot of the times in the same theme or the same ecosystem where it's like, well, we're going to do this about nature. It's like there was that time period where it's like Wingspan, Cascadia, Earth.
I think we're still in it, though.
And we're still in it. They're just
Yeah.
constantly coming out. I also wonder if it's like, is that just a way of not having to deal with sticky political issues of
Sure.
what you're putting in your game, and nature is friendly and safe for everybody. I think there's a level of that. I guess the question, the follow-up question is, do you think it works? Are there times where when so many people are trying to stand out, and we've talked on this podcast so often about the number of games that are coming out a year, does that help you get noticed anymore by doing something like that?
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I'm in a house with between 400 and 500 games. We've got a lot of games.
Yeah.
But I'm also in a house where if another roll and write game comes in, one or two are going to Noble Knight or getting traded today.
Yeah.
Right? If another, and so there's that, where is saturation? And
Yeah.
who, the other part of that is who decides. And I think some of those are personal decisions because
Sure.
I love great games. I love games that are fun and competitive and engaging and we can hopefully play as a family and that I have more games in my house than I'll probably ever be able to play.
Yeah.
And so I'm probably not a good person to answer that question because I think the other factor that we're not talking about, this is a hobby where there are hyper consumers who
Yeah.
all they want is more. All they want is, I want to play more games. I want more add-ons. I want this solo. I want that cooperative. I want that cooperative game to have a competitive mode. I want this. I want that. And I think that's another significant factor that really pushes the business side and the creative side because creatives are going to create, right? Game designers are going to design games. It's what they do. And I don't know where that ends. If it's a runway, a cliff, a road, it's got to end at some point, right?
It ends when somebody comes out with a new, different game that becomes super popular, and then everybody jumps onto that bandwagon.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the tides turn, is when somebody comes out with a new game. And so I always wonder, like, why are you trying to improve upon the old game, make that new game that's going to become, like, there's only one Ticket to Ride. There's only one Wingspan. And as good as some of the copycat games have done, they're never going to reach that level. And I'd be hard-pressed. I'd love to hear in the Discord if there are, what games are in my blind spot that were a what I would call a copycat, or like jumping onto a trend that then eclipsed the original trend game. You know, the other interesting thing is that you see it with artists as well. I'm not going to mention who the artist was, but you and I were walking through Gen Con last year, and there were 3 to 4 titles that had this artwork on the cover and throughout the game. And it's a very kind of distinct style. And yes, we are looking at hundreds of games walking through a Gen Con exhibit hall. However, we got to a point where we couldn't keep them straight. Was
Yeah.
that this game from this publisher or that game from that publisher?
Well, and
was
we
that
were
the one
arguing,
that,
and we weren't very confident in our argument. And that's
yeah,
where
I
it was
think
like,
that one looks good, but not the other one.
let's just change subjects. We're not even going to agree to disagree. We just no longer know what we're talking about because we've seen so much of the same thing.
Yeah.
That's
And
that
so-
singularity of board games, you know?
Yeah. So when you're trying to stand out, why are you trying to look like everybody else or pick up the leftovers?
Well, and that's where I think I come back to I like what you're saying there, but what's the story about the game? Why should I play this game? Why is this a good game? Why is this a great game? Why could this game work for me?
Yeah, I just get to a point where there's so many of the same type of theme, and like nature is the big one now.
Well,
where it's like they're just
you've heard me complain about that.
They're just all blending into each other. That it's like, okay, great, you got like, when we hear, we get emails and stuff from publishers. This is our new game. This is what's coming out, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's another nature game. Like, and then in 2 months or 3, it's like, which nature game was that? And certainly there are ones that we enjoy. We enjoy Cascadia. We enjoy Forest Shuffle. So there are some that crack through, but never to the point of the game changer game. And it certainly makes it harder to stand out when you're competing against a whole bunch of similar types.
So what do you do if you're a publisher?
As we talked earlier, I'm a sucker for theme. I would say, what's something else that we can make this game about? Is there a way that we can pivot? Because, and I think about a game like Let's Go to Japan, which, has gotten quite a bit of fanfare and came out and people seem to enjoy it. And it's like, it's a unique game about traveling to Japan.
Yeah.
And it's like the only other game that's kind of like that, I guess, is Tokaido, but it's a completely different type of thing where it's, that's where, can we make this about cars? Can we make it about something else that would then be like, oh, that's the new car game, or that's the new this?
Can we just go back to pirates, or is there more fantasy orc games coming out? Let's just give John Howe a call and see if he's available and reboot Ethnos.
I don't know what the answer is outside of. Because like you said, people are going to play the game and they're like, oh, well, what if you had a game that did this? And their brain is already in whatever theme that came from, that I think sometimes it's hard to pivot out of it. But I guess I would be taking a hard, long look if I were a publisher and being like, and it's completely different if you're like Thunderworks Games, where people are in love with that brand.
Yeah.
And you're adding on to an existing thing. They're adding on to an existing universe. That's completely different than somebody making a game that seems very close to Ulos, and it's not Thunderworks. But I always be pushing, like, is there another theme? Is there something different we can do with this? But I'm not a publisher, and I didn't make Wingspan or Ticket to Ride. So I don't have those millions, and I don't know whether that's accurate advice or not, and maybe just selling $20,000 or 20,000 copies of a game that's kind of like another game is just as good as,
Yeah, I think you may want to edit this, so take them. But when we were at Gen Con, there was a game that I was talking about and asking a publisher for a review copy. And I was just being very direct about it. And the publisher said back to me, we don't need your help telling the story of this game, but how about you take these 3 games instead?
Yeah.
And that was something that always stuck with me about, that's a good business move for them.
Yeah.
And I think that action, that behavior, that interaction from publisher to reviewers and talkers of games is also part of this issue. Is that, no, that's our most successful game. We're trying to get these 3 other games a little breath of life. Here, take these, give these a look. And at the same time, it's the churn. So while all of that is happening at the micro level, right? The interaction between us at the Game Schooler podcast and Enter Name a Publisher here. At the macro level, there's 3,500 games in 2023 that are coming out.
Yeah.
And those are the factors. It's just a unique set of factors, man. It really is.
And even that idea of like, well, I don't need help promoting this one. We'd like to get, these off the ground. And it's like, and then what happens when those aren't off the ground for a reason, because they're not as good as the other one.
I don't argue that, though.
What's that?
But we could keep going. You're good.
What do you mean? Tell me more.
It's not that they aren't as good. It could just be that their story hasn't been told, or they didn't catch fire.
Yeah, it's both of those, right?
Yeah.
It's a combination of sometimes there are gems that just got lost in the shuffle. Other times there's a very specific reason why they got lost in the shuffle.
Yes.
And
yes,
and going through and figuring out how that happens, or which end you're on, is not very envious. So let us know in the Discord or send us an email. Let us know what you think about this. Is it even an issue? Am I making it up? We'd love to hear your feedback, and if you're a publisher, let me know too what your thoughts are on this. I'd love to hear that as well. So let's move on to the high five. If you're anything like us, you're constantly on the hunt for new games to try out. This week, we're not going to be talking about games, but the people that publish games. So right after we get done talking about publishers, we're going to talk about the ones that we really like.
We slam you, now we bring you back.
And who knows if, I'm trying to think if any of these
This is
companies,
a high 8 list, right? Because I can't turn this into 5.
So this is a really interesting list as I was making it, because it's not like other lists of how you classify it, where you can look at a game and be like, I really like that game, so of course it's going on the list. Whenever I look at a publisher and I say it's kind of a broader thing, it's like, yeah, but that game is hot garbage. Like, I like all these games, but that one I don't. So you're kind of taking like the totality of their work along with the idea of how excited do I get if a new game is coming out, or I hear that they're coming out with a new game, which is kind of where I landed. And some of these have changed. I mean, at one point, we just talked about Renegade Game Studios. At one point, they would have been on my list.
Yeah.
But their company's kind of gone in a different direction, and they're not making the same type of games that are appealing to me in the same way. And so those things, like if we came back to this 5 years from now, we would probably have completely different lists as companies define or refine what type of games they are making, or if there's a slew of games that come out that are misses for us.
Doug, I think 6 months from now, I think
well, there you go.
Really, the publishing industry has just changed so rapidly in the last 5 years. And but I'm guessing 5 years ago, I would have said the same thing. There seem to be publishers that pop up and go down and get acquired, become a part of the Asmodee family.
Well, and that's the hard part too, right? Is that you've got some of these bigger organizations where, whether it's Asmodee or Hachette or the Flat River Group, where it's like, those are so all-encompassing. It's like they're not really publishers anymore. The studios within them are publishers.
Yeah. So all that, I just wanted to throw some caveats around. My list would look very different a year ago to where it is right now. But I have 8.
Okay.
I really have 8. So I'll start at 5 because
and
I'm
I think
hoping...
I think some of my honorable mentions will be on your list, maybe.
Yeah. So I'll jump in at 5 for me, and this one is Direwolf. And Direwolf is one that they publish very few games, but when they do, I take a look at it, and they often find their way into my collection. Wild Tiled West was their game from 2023 that I picked up at Gen Con, and I really enjoy. Dune, I love Dune. I've had a few of the expansions, and I've traded them or let them go, but I still have the base box Dune Imperium, not the Dune Imperium Uprising yet. And then Clank. I have the original Clank and the Clank in Space. And so when they publish a game, I look at it and I want to try to play it. And oftentimes those games will find their way into my house and tend to stick around. Sometimes they go, but that's my number 5 is Direwolf Studios.
Yeah.
Right out of Colorado in the US of A.
All right. My number 5 is maybe one of the biggest ones for me, which is Yellow. And it's one that I feel like...
spell that for our newest listeners?
Iello. It's like Jello with an I in the front instead of a J. And Yellow is one that I'm always intrigued when they're coming out with stuff, because they seem to have a pretty And this is me not saying that I love every Yellow game. They've got a lot of games that I don't care for, don't like, things like that. But I'm always interested in what they're doing. They always seem to have really good artwork, and they stretch the gamut from having some kids games to family games to some light hobby games. And there are games from that category all the way through that I really like, whether that's a family game like King of Tokyo or a hobby game like Korra. Can't think of what the subtitle is, but Rising Empires, Empires of something. There's that all the way down to Welcome to and things like that. So it's a company that, although they are not batting 1,000 with me, I'm always intrigued because they seem to be in the weight category of games that I'm interested in. So that's my number 5, Yellow.
Yeah, that's really good, Doug. The next one, it's almost like just because of a developer. And so very, very small publisher, but I wanted to shine a light on them. They're my honorable mention. And then as I was ordering the list, and that is Cardboard Alchemy. And they have published Flamecraft, and then they have a couple of games coming out that I've backed. Andromeda's Edge, which is basically second version of the Dwellings of Eldervale, but Peter Vaughan and Luke Laurie. And then Critter Kitchen is another one that is coming out. So it's really a publisher on reputation, a publisher that I'm excited about, a publisher on potential. But what they did with Flamecraft and really how they're approaching games and the types of games that they're making, I'm excited to see what happens here in 2024 and 2025 with Cardboard Alchemy.
Yeah, good one.
We'll see.
We'll
Potentially.
See. We'll see. Could be great. Could
it's
be
a flyer.
Yeah.
It's that fast wide receiver in the 5th round of the fantasy football snake draft that everyone looks in the room and is like, oh, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. My number 4 is AEG, or Alderac Entertainment Group. This is another one like Yellow where it's like not everyone is a hit, but they've come out with a lot of good. I mean, just scrolling through the list: Cascadia, Istanbul, War Chest, Space Base, Calico. They were original publishers of Love Letter, Dead Reckoning,
Mystic
Tiny
Vale.
Towns, Guild of Merchant Explorers, Ready Set Bet, Point Salad. So a lot of games that have really worked well for me. And every time they come up with something new, I'm checking it out, whether I choose to buy it, back it, or not. But I'm always interested in what they're doing. So that's my number 4, AEG.
Yeah, that's awesome. And number 3 for me, it wasn't on the list when I first made it through, and then I looked to my left and I was like, oh, I have to put this company on the list, and that's Restoration Games. Some of it might be recency bias. Doug and I have been playing as much of Return to Dark Tower as we can. I've also gotten into the Unmatched series, not as much as our friends over at the Family Gamers. I'm not an expert, but I've been dabbling in it. I appreciate it. And going all the way back to Downforce, one of the first.
Yeah.
This is a company that takes older games and brings in new mechanics and new art and modernize a rule set. Dinosaur Tea Party is another one that I just simply can't deny. I picked that game up for $19 when I was on a business trip, brought it home. We're going to need a second copy of that soon because we're burning through it in our house and at Board Game Club. So Restoration Games is one for me that I also know that I'm going to get a it's family friendly, even if it's got some orcs in it and some fantasy in it. They're not voluptuous. I can get it to the table and not worry about it. So that's number 3 for me is Restoration Games. I've always taken a peek at what they're doing. I look at their Twitter page once in a while, see what's coming out. That's number 3.
All right, my number 3 is going to be, I'm going to do a Michael McCabe last minute shuffle. I'm going to switch my 3 and 2. My number 3 is going to be
I'll allow it.
Space Cowboys.
Yeah.
Which probably gets overlooked because it's part of the Asmodee thing, and it's they've
done some good games.
They don't have a huge kind of presence of kind of being known, but they've got some really great games that have worked well for me. The biggest one being the Unlock series. They are the company behind Splendor and Splendor Duel. They've done Elysium, which is an awesome game. Black Fleet is an old pirate game that I really enjoy as well. And Hit Z Road, which we haven't talked about, which is just another classic Martin Wallace zombie game that I love. I think we might have played that on one of Michael's first game nights. But kind of under the radar, and it's not one where they're like, oh, and they're a French company, so there's not a lot of like, oh, here's the U.S. press release. We don't hear a lot about it. It's almost like the game came out, and then you find out, oh, that was a horrible Guild game or a Space Cowboys game teaser there. So my number 3 is Space Cowboys.
Doug with the Freudian slip. That's good. That's good. Yeah, number 2 for me, I did say at the front end that we got a review copy. We don't get a ton of review copies because we don't solicit many. But number 2 for me is Devere. When I just look at the games that I am choosing to play on my own solo, just because I want to play them. And then also games that I'm looking to play because I want to try to get my game group to play them. And then also games that I'm looking to play for content for the podcast and with my family. Devere is simply hitting it out of the park. And shortly after we put together our criteria, and I mean very shortly after, like within months of having our children's game, family game, light hobby, and hobby criteria, I was, putzing around in the Devere site. They have family plus expert, and kids. And it's like, ooh, they're kind of doing the same thing that I love how they categorize their games so that I know where to put my focus. Really, 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 really good, clean art. Games that work for me from a color standpoint. They've got some Reiner games like Millefiori. Three Ring Circus is a game that I've enjoyed. We talked about Cities, but then they also have these other, their expert category. Though there's some meaty bigger box games. It's like, oh yeah, I kind of want to give that a try because I enjoyed Lacrimosa and my solo play of it. Now I want to go back and check out Bitoku at a convention. So, and I also feel like they're just. I don't have to own all of them, but I do want to try to play a good number of them. So that for me is a publisher right now in 2024 that is really doing some things for me, and that's Devere.
All right, awesome. My number 2, Horrible Guild. And this is one that is, if you're getting close to a lot of good games that I really enjoy, as you move up the list, you're maybe getting closer to the batting 1,000 type of thing. But, this is the company that developed Potion Explosion and Railroad Inc., Dragon Castle, The Great Split we talked about on the podcast, Sunrise Lane, which we will probably talk about on the podcast. Dungeon Fighter is a dexterity dice flicking game. And so they've had Unicorn Fever, Steam Park, which got published under Yellow. Yellow published it originally. So a lot of good games, and another company that, whether it's a marriage between theme and art and different things that they're doing, this is another company that always gets my attention when they've got something new coming out. So that's my number 2, Horrible Guild.
Yeah, really good call there, Doug. And even some games that I don't think either one of us have played yet that are probably still on our want to play list, like Evergreen and some of their other titles. So really good. Number 1 for me, I don't know if we'll have crossover, but number 1 for me is Roxley as a publisher. Do we have crossover? Yes or no? If I can get a nod, because all right, then I'm going to go all in on Roxley. They really do. 3 things for me. 1, they've done the same thing that Restoration Games has done in terms of they've taken awesome games and made them even more incredible with their production value and streamlining some rules. Right there, I'm thinking about Brass, with Lancashire and Birmingham. And then the other thing that they've done, their Dice Throne series is just incredible. And I am a completionist when it comes to Dice Throne. It's on the bottom shelf behind me here. Just absolutely love what Gavin Brown and Manny Tremblay and crew have done with that. And then the third thing, I just take a look at everything that they make. And it has not been 1,000, but I've had most of it has been in my house at one point or time. And most of it has worked, including Skyrise, which was a recent game of the week. Just an absolute beautiful, stunning game that I know I'm going to be able to teach. Brass might be the exception of that. I don't know if I'm able to teach that, but I can play it with a good teacher. And so that's my current favorite publisher. Just love everything they do. And if you would have, Doug and I were pretty much fanboys at Gen Con last year when we saw thanking and I think they thought that I might have been trying to give them a hug, but there was a level of enthusiasm there where it was just so ecstatic of what that company out of the Pacific Northwest does. So that's my number one publisher is Roxley.
All right. Well, they were on my honorable mention along with Restoration Games. My number one, and this goes back into my early days of gaming, and if they have an announcement, I'm paying attention, and that's Days of Wonder. Just based on the track record of and it's another company that is doing limited releases each year. You know, there might be only 2 or 3 games, if that, coming out a year, so you can really pay attention to them when they get announced and come out. And because of that, I'm always going to look at them. And I don't know how high they currently are with me. Certainly, I loved Heat. I love Deep Blue. Some of their more recent non-Ticket to Ride titles that they've come out with. I have the Ticket to Ride Legacy game. But anytime something is coming out, I'm always going to look at it, which is, for me, is a great sign of, yeah, that needs to be my number one. If there's a press release that came out from Days of Wonder tomorrow, you can bet I'm diving in and doing a little bit more research than maybe I would if it was any other company. So they're my number one, Days of Wonder. Who'd you have honorable mentions, Michael?
Number 8 for me
crossover there.
Number 8 for me is Game Right / Buffalo.
Yep.
Even though they're 2 separate companies, I think they're both in one same company, and I look at them very similarly. I'll send it back to you if you have, because I have 2 others.
The Op is one that I'm paying more attention to their non-branded games. They seem to be having a kind of an uptick with that are not IP based. So I'm starting to look at them more frequently.
Number 7 for me is Amigo, especially Amigo US with their card games. I mean, I've got Pick a Pepper over behind me here, and just Kabanga was a game that we played recently. Kabanga, sorry, and just a number of those games going all the way back to like 1994. You know, with Take 5 and some of those. Just they my family tends to perk up when I bring a small tuck box of Amigo to the table for the first time. They're like, ooh, what's this? Obviously with Llama, but Amigo is just a fantastic publisher for our family.
Yeah. I also have Z-Man games on my list, which is one that they certainly is not 1,000, but the ones that hit really hit.
Really hit.
And I've enjoyed them through the years.
And then the last one for me, number 6, which was tough to not have it on the high 5, but I've had some near hits, so they're near misses lately, but Stonemaier. They're just another fantastic publisher that makes some games that have brought me a lot of joy.
Yep, I'm surprised nobody mentioned Lucky Duck, which I had on my honorable mention. I thought that might be high for you. And then Arcane Wonders has had some good ones as well. So a lot of great publishers doing a lot of great work out there, all trying to stand out. And
you could have made it a top 10 pretty easily.
Yeah, exactly. So subscribe to the podcast if you aren't already, so you can be alerted every time a new episode comes out, which is every week on Friday. You can follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. Join the Discord, gameschooler.com/Discord. And next week, we're going to have kind of a special episode. We're hoping to interview Chris Leader from Calliope Games and spend some time with him as everybody is winding down over the 4th of July holiday here in the U.S. We'll try and get that out for you. And thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.